not good enough demands. They aren't giving in to them, right? Problem is this. If you go to the same demands, the reaction will not be any different. And hence people's belief in the movement will not increase. We need to ask for more aggressive things to make sure the movement resurrects, right? But finally on the idea of ability of success of partial democracies. For you to say that us having autonomy that we've enjoyed in the last 100 years was having a Politburo member governing us, even if we don't get complete democracy, but because we're aggressive and we force China to come to this discussion table, that's not a value, that's a lie.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his speech. May I please invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hear a lot of ought to's and we should do this and we should do that, aspirations, identities, so on and so forth. Brilliant, right? Hong Kong has a different identity. We have this culture of democracy. Really brilliant, right? But here's the thing, right? Movements are not moved by normative idealism, right? They're moved by structural dialogue with somebody who's the other, who you are negotiating with, and who this particular other is, has a huge stakeholder, and you do not have a bargaining chip, and that's our primary clash on the idea that China is not becoming that, is not the same power that it was earlier. Obama is meeting Shinzo Abe, right? Let's understand a way. There is a debate going on in Japan to not militarize, and largely people are arguing to not militarize because it would make China angry, right? Because of the fact, and let's understand, this China, the Senakaku Island dispute is still subsisting, right? The Arunachal conflict is still subsisting because of the fact that these other countries do not have a bargaining chip. Why do they not have a bargaining chip? Because let's understand that China is an industrial exporter, right? It's an industrial exporter who exports like several goods, right? 40% of the imports of the United States of America come from China, right? So imposing sanctions on China is a good amount of shooting himself in the foot. So does India, right? And that's the reason why we cannot do much about the Arunachal conflict in the first place, right? And the next thing that Bata comes up here and says, he says that, well, yes, there is this accessibility to the world because Hong Kong is a little more open, right? Let's understand even the Uyghur movement was relatively open in like that several articles, right? The idea is not being open, right? The idea is, the idea was after being open, right, would that elicit a reaction, right? Let's understand, it would not elicit a reaction. And this is the problem with the idea of media. The media is gone away, right? If you like turn on CNN or Fox News or like BBC, the media is gone away because there is an impasse, because there is nothing happening really over here, right? Because that's the idea. The movement is losing its like sort of veracity, its significance because of the fact that there is nothing happening, there is no reaction, right? And that's the big problem over here, because after people knowing that there is this like sort of like oppression in like in the Uyghur area or Hong Kong, people are still in the international community still not empowered to do anything, right? So what should be the this thing, right? The approach for it, right? To argue a mid path, right? And that is significantly important, right? Because let's understand a complete democracy, right? A complete democracy. What results in asking for a complete democracy is number one. Here's the thing, right? The movement, right now is a bunch of students going on the road, and slowly we see that people are going back to their own lives, right? Because now it's too long and there is nothing happening, right? So most of the people are molded by the sort of like reaction that happens from the state that is China, right? And let's understand, while asking something incredibly radical, these people, the police officers of China are just simply standing there on the particular road. Those people are sitting. The media is really bored of like recording them, right? There is nothing actually going on over here, right? But let's understand, because once you need to reason this movement, you have to ask something strategically, something that China would strategically concede, right? Because it does not matter much to them, right? And let's understand that is the minor democracy that we are going for. No, 15 seconds please, right? Let's understand that it has some economic significance. Hong Kong has some economic significance. It is an economic center, right? Let's understand that, no country ever wants any sort of protest like by their own particular way, right? And here's the thing, right? And here's the thing, like they can choose, like the idea of this thing, like the idea of minor democracy is like they can choose a particular candidate by taking consideration of both the people of Hong Kong and the centrist party, so that there is balance, sort of balance. 5th minute I take you, stop heckling, right? A sort of balance view that is that could possibly happen. This way, China can sort of portray themselves as somebody who listens to Hong Kong, right? Somebody who gives like some sort of symbolic like concession to Hong Kong, so that the protests like stop, so that the protests are not as voracious and China is not seen as a particular candidate. What happens to the movement over here, right? Now what you are doing is that, right, you are not like sort of aspirations and the hopes of the people, right? The end is not inaccessible, right? I'll take it in the 5th minute, right? The aspirations and the hope of the people are not inaccessible now, right? Now the people realistically see, right, that China could probably give a concession. So the possibility of a concession, right, comes much more in our case, right? As opposed to their case, because now their case is asking incredibly radical something. And here's the problem with something incredibly radical, right? What is China, right? It is one party, like Communist Party, ruling party that governs China, right? And to understand something, if they conceive of something like so incredibly radical, such as a complete democracy, what happens is that other movements like the Uyghur movements, other movements like within China are significantly perpetuated, right? And here's the problem with it, right? Here's the problem with it. It's sort of slippery slope for China, and it removes this image of China from within the people of China as a strong hand, as a strong country, and becomes a sort of symbol of weakness, right? That it reiterates by accepting something so incredibly radical against the core ideology of the party in the first place, right? And this, yeah, go ahead.
Your argument the movement is dying out. Are you claiming that we shouldn't try and fight one last time and should just accept it and belong out of it?
Here's my simple argument, right? The movement is dying out because you're being too idealistic, right? The movement should aspire to should be consonant to the aspirations of the people, right? Once the people realize that China could have a particular incentive, right? Could have an incentive to give a small minor strategic concession, that would be a symbolic victory for the movement in the first place. That would symbolically show that, right, the movement is in dialogue with the state. The movement is relevant to the state, right? The moment you make it so radical, the movement becomes irrelevant to the state, and you sort of die out, right? And that's the problem, right? And when something is so static, the media doesn't give it enough attention. The media doesn't give it enough. Coming back to my the harms of asking something incredibly radical, and why China will have like absolutely no incentive or motivation of listening to something that is so radical, such as a complete democracy, because they're ideologically completely antithetical to the idea of democracy, right? This is the Communist Party at the center, right? Does not want to give us a sort of complete democracy, right? By having a midway candidate, right? A person who sort of makes the Hong Kong people happy, but also can be manipulated by China. What it does, right? Is that it allows China to also influence policies in Hong Kong, and also makes the people in Hong Kong happy, right? And this is a sort of win-win situation that we're sort of portraying it to you. But on the other hand, right, like if it completely concedes to it, right? If it completely concedes to it, it shows itself as weak as in the international community. It shows itself weak from within the movement that is going on within China, right? And it sort of tells them that strategically you can ask for anything and we'll give it, because you can come out of the streets very well, right? And that is a big problem, because what China sustains itself on is the strong image that it has even in the international community, that it is an economic superpower, that is a military superpower from within China, and the whole state is based on the idea of strength and power, right? And providing like economic amenities to people, right? And once this image goes away, right, there's a lot of questioning that will happen within China, and that could possibly lead to disintegration of China. And this is why the probability of accepting a complete democracy is not nil in the case.
I thank the Deputy Director for his speech. May I please invite the government to it.
Mr. Speaker, the idea is this, right? This is not the same as other movements in China trying to get freedom, because this is a case of Hong Kong not wanting to become a part of China, not Hong Kong wanting to secede from China, right? There's a substantial difference between two of them, right? The idea is this. Side opposition has conceded to the fact that this movement is dying out, right? They haven't told us what they're going to do differently, right? It's a dichotomy between taking one last shot or letting this movement die out forever, right? Or like, the next thing is that we've given you two prime reasons, right? About the stakeholders, about why China can't bully us into submission, and about the media, right? They haven't given us any alternative. We come and tell you that when you like China is only going to accept the terms where a Chinese leader becomes like the nominal head of Hong Kong, right? This is like very problematic, as Partha pointed out to you in his second speech, because they will suppress things like Twitter, they will suppress things like Facebook. They now have complete control over Hong Kong, right? This is like we think we need to take an aggressive stance so that people buy into this movement, so that people see that we're doing something different from what we've been doing before, right? If you're agreeing that the movement is dying out, you have to tell us what you're going to do differently and how that's going to work, right? But firstly, on clarifying our stance on economic policies in Hong Kong, right? We tell you that there are like a huge number of international companies and front-running companies that come into Hong Kong because of the low taxation that exists, right? Like Hong Kong has more per capita income than China. We think like companies are a lot more skeptical of now investing in Hong Kong at the moment when like Chinese communism comes in and this Chinese leader suppresses the media, increases taxes and imposes its own policies on Hong Kong, right? Get this straight. They've said China's really hard and suppresses everyone, and yet they're saying that, oh look, China's going to concede to all this, right? China's not going to concede to all of this. China's going to put its own nominal leader. That's sick. It's going to be worse for Hong Kong, right? Like then they said that no, like we've given you reasons as to why China can't use force against us. Like we've given you reasons as to how Japan's militarizing, and they said, oh no, Japan's not militarizing. There's a debate. We've given you reasons as to why the USA has its ships now in the South China Sea to keep a check on China, right? China has been facing a lot of political conflict recently, right? In the case that Philippines has been able to push them back when their ships in the South China Sea thought that China was encroaching on their territory. So, tell you that another political conflict sit with Hong Kong, which has a melting pot of different cultures, where so many countries have their companies set up. There is incentive for people to intervene and to help Hong Kong out, right? We don't think that China is simply going to go over and steamroll Hong Kong, right? But next, on cultural differences, right? We've told you how like China tried to portray Hong Kong as a small part of greater China, right? About how Hong Kong isn't its own separate cultural identity and Hong Kong is a part of China. We think that's problematic, right? Because people openly rose in revolt. We think it's necessary for people to aggressively demand for the fact that they want to be separate from China, they have a separate identity.